Hey, everybody. Welcome back to today's edition of Viral Faith. Glad to have you on board. This little bit thing we've been doing here since pandemic and lockdown started, just to try to encourage your faith, particularly on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, right about the noon hour. And the format is varied, and oftentimes I have guests, which is the case today. You may recognize this handsome fella with me today. It's Clinton Fopple, and so if you are tuning in, just let me know that you are here, and make sure you're commenting, and so that we can interact. If you don't know Clinton Fopple, then you're missing out. Clinton and I used to team together back at Fellowship until the Lord called him out to launch what is now become Remedy Live. Clinton, tell us, what is your mission? What are you doing that's changing the world there at Remedy Live?
Yeah, so we ventured to have meaningful conversations, and we use technology to do that. So, kind of simply put, we've got a chat center that's open 24 hours a day that chats with people from around the United States. And then we do a lot of events. We used to actually get together in person with people. Now it's more webinar based, but we do a lot of events where we'll use technology to allow people to answer questions anonymously through polling or through other different types of interactive medias, because we believe that confession and talking about what's really going on in our lives is, first of all, for so many, foreign. But second of all, it moves us closer to understanding the freedom that Jesus Christ paid for on that cross. And many of the people we talk to have no interest in Jesus or no interest in spiritual freedom, but they do want to talk about something that helps move them out of their loneliness. And so we're using this as a mission, as missionaries, to reach a generation that is in pain in one way, shape, or form.
And isn't it so timely to be having the bulk of that reach be through digital means
Yeah.
these days? Just you were moving solidly towards that and leveraging that, and it just makes all the more sense even now. So I know you're having a big impact with that. So Clinton is the founder of Remedy Live and
Co-founder. I want to give my friend Char Binkley the dues.
You and Char, sorry about that. You and
That's
Char
right.
co-founded, and Clinton's leading out on that. And over recent years, you guys have been focusing effort in particularly being very mindful of mental health, particularly within young people, and the chat sessions that make connections with where people are. So I kind of want to center our conversation here around what's impacting our mental health currently. I mean, we talked throughout the pandemic that this forced isolation is just going to do a number on everybody's kind of mental health, for sure. And we moved out of one phase of the pandemic, and now we're in another, but along with huge social tension and social unrest. So just give me your pulse, Clinton. What are you hearing? What are you seeing? What are you reading about how the current environment, pandemic or otherwise, is impacting mental health?
Yeah, well, the pandemic is or has caused a huge change in what we would consider regularity. So change for some people, I think some people say they love change, but I think even those that are innovators and love change have been rattled with this, because the common conveniences that we have grown used to have been altered, in some cases even lost. So I think change is the biggest thing that's caused everyone to become a little bit more unsettled. And I think the next part of that is that we've seen a huge shift in the unknown. We are an information age, and I can Google pretty much whatever I want and try to find an answer. I call it an opinion. It's not necessarily the truth, but I can find some opinions. But we don't really have a lot of information right now on what we can say is solid truth, except that there's a God and he's sovereign and he's aware of what's going on and he's trustworthy with all things. But from a day-to-day perspective, there's just a ton of unknowns. And I would include the unknowns and the change in what we're seeing also with our conversations about Black Lives Mattering, that we've always believed at Fellowship that Black Lives Matter. We've always believed, I know you, Joe, we've always believed that, but our society hasn't always believed that. And so that change is occurring there. We're seeing far more willingness for people to put their action now in play and not just talk about it, but show up at rallies and use their voices, and in some case, use violence to say, I want you to pay attention. And then that leads to the last thing I think is really, it's something that I think we're all aware of, but it's fear. Fear is at play with a lot of what we're experiencing these last 3 months. Fear of getting sick, fear of losing job, fear of not going back to school, fear of it being different forever, fear of having to wear a mask, and fear of the mask not matching my shirt. Fear, fear, fear. And so you can look at
what people will think because I'm not wearing a mask, or because
exactly, yeah, right there. Yeah, I was in a conversation yesterday, and the person I was speaking to wasn't masked. Came right at me with a handshake and a hug, and I just did this. And it spoke to them that I wasn't yet ready to embrace their philosophy of maskless hugging. But I could tell they were offended. And so we got a brand new political correctness or incorrectness, however you want to put it. But there's a fear of what's expected of me. How do I act? What do I say? What if I say the wrong thing? What if I do the wrong thing? What if I do nothing? Yeah. And so those are my big ones: the fear, the unknown, and then the biggest change. Those are the three things that I'm kind of building on these days.
Right. I'm figuring folks can kind of relate who are joining in and keying into this conversation, Clinton. Let me know which one of those three has been kind of top shelf for you in recent months. Is it some type of fear, or is it just like the unsettledness of the unknown, or continual change that has got you out of step and kind of offbeat? Let me know what ranks up there for you as Clinton goes on to share. Maybe, so change, fear, the unsettledness that comes with the unknowns. What sort of impact does that have on the health of our brains, do you think?
Well, I want to say as a caveat, and you've already done a great job, Joe, of introducing me. I appreciate that, but I am not an expert. I got to say it maybe twice. There's no letters after my name that allow me to say that you should quote me on anything to do with neuroscience or brain chemistry. But what I can tell you is I'm a normal guy that's trying to normalize the conversation around something we all have, and that's mental health. And I think it's going to take, just like when we talk about changing the way that our country thinks about race, we have to have conversations like this to normalize the conversation. So what I'm going to share is what I've learned, especially in these last 5 years, interacting with literally tens of thousands of people, whether it's through live events or whether it's through our chat center. And what I can tell you without any doubt in my mind is that the brain is probably, and I'm going to be careful how I say this because I'm sitting with my friend, my pastor Joe here. I think the brain is one of God's most mysterious and complex inventions. I think the brain is so incredibly mysterious and complex that we don't know everything, of course, that we should even know at this juncture in 2020. We've made huge leaps even in the last decade with MRI technology and understanding the brain more. But what we do know is that change to circumstance combined with past traumas or relationships in the sphere of the biology of this organic thing called our brain, a lot of things can go south real quickly when you add change the unknown and fear. The brain is affected by that. And the thing that complicates it the most, Joe, is that it's not just an organ that's pumping blood, which is important, or helping process, the waste of our body like the kidney is. The brain tells you who you are. And that's where it gets messy, because I can start to believe lies about who I am based on circumstance and trauma, or the biology of maybe my chemical balance isn't quite right. So this is a very important conversation, because it's not something we can fix with a simple answer.
No, yeah, I think about how complex the brain is, as you point out. There's like these hardcore functions keeping us breathing, regulating the various systems, respiratory and all that. And we tend to think of, the brain controls that, but then there's this whole area of the brain as it relates to chemical processes, emotion, identity, and it's doing all that too. And it's impacted by everything around it. It's impacted by our environment.
Yes. Yeah.
So I love that idea of normalizing the conversations and talking about that. And you've been leading the charge among students and among even churches to say, hey, if we're not talking about this, we have to talk about it more. And I'm totally on board with that notion, such that we're launching into a few weeks of timely discussion around mental health at Fellowship. I don't know if you caught the beginning one last week, but
I did.
Clinton's going to be sharing at Fellowship this week, and I'm really excited to hear more what you are going to say. But why is it so important for the church to be engaged in this conversation around mental health now?
Yeah, so that's a really loaded question, and I don't think this is a 3-hour Facebook Live event, so I'm going to be to the point. We have been given one life to live. We are called in the church to make disciples, to spread the good news that the one who manufactured us provided a solution or a remedy in Jesus Christ, so that if we look to Jesus, if we allow Jesus to lead us as Lord, and if we choose to give him our future, he will give us our life back in an abundant way, life to the full. But if I can't process that, we've often said the gospel is so simple and yet so complex and mysterious at the same time. If I can't process that here, because I'm living in the past of unforgiveness, or I'm living in the brokenness of the fact that I feel sad every day because my serotonin levels are so low. If I'm living, and here's a even better way to look at it. If I'm all alone in a room of a crowded people, then the ability for me to live my life to the full diminishes, because I start to go down the road of the latter part, or the first part, I should say, of John 10:10, that there's a thief that's trying to rob and kill and destroy my ability to live my life to the full. And so Jesus Christ comes not just to save us from our sins, which he does, not just to be the most amazing role model in human history, but as he says in John 18:37, he says, I've come to testify to the truth. And the truth is that we need to see ourselves with clarity and with complete honesty. And that comes through talking about what we think, how we feel, what's stopping us from being healthy of mind. And sadly, the number one way that Satan keeps us from doing that is what we call the secret struggle at Remedy Live. Not admitting those things, not confessing those struggles, faking it till I make it. I'm an evangelical, so I'm going to vote this way, and I'm just going to show up at church and give my 10% and go home. And those things are not wrong at a level that's important. But what's really sad is when we live a lie rather than living to the full. And mental health, if we talk about it, people begin to come out of the shadows and say, you know what, that transparent moment you had, Joe, in your last sermon caused me to feel like I could become transparent and share that I struggle with thoughts of suicide or depression. And so as the church, which is a hospital in so many different ways, we need to treat each other with that value that says, how are you? And really mean it. Like, I'm going to make the time to hear your answer. I'm going to make the time to not provide a solution because I'm not an expert, but to provide the one answer that you need to hear, that you're not alone. We're in this together. Let's find some answers together. So the church is so great. This is the number one gathering of adults in America. We have so much opportunity to provide freedom to the captives that struggle within their skulls to believe that their identity truly is one of being a child of God.
Yeah, that's so critical. I talk a lot in fellowship circles, particularly in our leadership circles, but it applies everywhere, as you're saying too. That level of transparency, to name your secret struggle, transparency in the church must be rewarded.
Yeah.
It must be incentivized, because we're better when we're transparent, and particularly with leaders. I mean, as you take on more leadership responsibility or influence, it kind of works against you, and you feel like you have to be less transparent because people won't get it or you'll disappoint people. But in fact, wherever you're at, more transparency, more vulnerability leads to good things, not bad things. Or at least
Absolutely.
that's the way it should be in the church. That's the way
Yeah.
it was with Jesus. He says, confess your sins.
Yeah. I think the only problem with the equation of transparency, and this is a hard thing to probably fully explain, are the individuals we have within our church family that are transparent to a fault for the purpose of getting not just attention seeking, but for the purpose of feeling valued. And so we need people like you, Joe, and people like me and people like Becky Baker and others that are willing to say, I hear what you're saying. You're struggling here, but who are you? Where does your value lie? Does it lie in that? Does it lie in that? Or does it lie in the fact that you are created in the image of God, that you're a one-of-a-kind masterpiece of the Most High? And to help someone get to the core, I'm going call to obedience now, right? To get to the core of that root of self. And mental health at its fundamental level, it's of course the health of the brain and all of the things that we'll discuss even this weekend. But at the core of mental health, it's who am I?
Which is essentially a question of discipleship, right?
That's it. You see, that's how beautiful this is. It's who am I? Whose am I? That puts hope, right? If I know whose I am, then now I have hope to live this life. And then who am I gets turned on its butt with answering from most. He says, I am. The God of the universe says, I am. I'm sufficient. So, again, I could go off for hours on that question that you asked, Joe, but I think that, truly the beauty is that if we're a transparent culture, we can also, and I'm going to use the word admonish. It doesn't probably fit as well here, but I'm going to admonish some who I know they're being transparent every day, but we're really not talking about what really is the core of the issue.
No, I get it. It's kind of like if I'm being transparent to create my own identity.
Yeah.
If I'm getting identity from my transparency, then I'm a couple degrees off, and it all comes back to who's your identity, and we don't create that. That's the freedom, is that our identity is given to us if we're humble enough to accept it and receive it and trust it.
Yes.
As opposed to, I'll show you, I'll be the boss of me, and I'll be who I need to be, and then that just runs into so much stress and
or the victim mentality that we stay stuck in our muck and our mire, and we justify it. We justify that as Christians sometimes because I'm a sinner, and I need God because I'm just a pain in the butt. I'm a train wreck, and I'm a sinner. I'm a train wreck, and I am, but I'm also a co-heir in Christ, and I'm called to not be. I'm not called to live in the pain and say this is all I've got. I'm called to to springboard off the pain to a better way to live and to embrace the struggle, to persevere through that, to develop character.
Yeah.
And that's the beauty again of discipleship. So we get back to that word.
Well, I want to ask you one more question, but I want to thank Debbie. Shared that she just right in sync with this. Thank you for your honesty and transparency, I guess, Debbie, in terms of, she said, this phrase of faking it till I make it. We can get so boxed in and we think we can figure out how to do it on our own. And she just confessed that. So as always, Debbie, appreciate your honesty. And to all of you, I hope those who are watching are connecting with some level of this. Let me know if you are. So Clinton, as I ask a lot of people as a part of Viral Faith, then what aspect over these super challenging and different weeks over the last 2 months, where has the Lord been encouraging you to more faith? Where have you been building out more faith because of how he's leading you and your response, either within your family, your marriage, your work and ministry, or just even in yourself? Could you grab hold of a nugget of what that looks like and describe that for us?
Well, I there's so many answers. I wish you would have texted me that before, Joe. That's a good question. There's so many answers.
You work on the fly, man. It's beautiful.
That's right. Yeah. Professionally, my faith has grown in huge ways the last 3 months because I've had the privilege of doing a lot of our WiredX webinars in the marketplace and be a missionary that's not only knocking on doors, but now I'm being invited into communities. And I think one of the greatest compliments to anyone that serves the Lord is that he's well liked and he's wanted. He's got influence. And so my faith builds where I see that there's no other way there's no other way I could be able to share the good news of Jesus Christ if it were not for the Lord connecting the dots. So my faith grows there professionally every day. I think personally, in full transparency, the beginning of the pandemic, I was really struggling because of the unknown, right? And maybe slightly the fear. As you know, Joe, Remedy's a nonprofit, $1.2 million budget. I'm the fundraiser. God's the provider. But I was nervous about that. And it was through confession to friends and people that you and I both know well that helped me to get past myself and see that I still believe that God is sovereign and he will provide. But then personally as well, I think my faith is growing in that I'm seeing the beautiful gift of time. Time is finite. It's limited. You can't get it back. It's got a great ROI if we invest it. And so it's been great. I got 3 daughters. I've got lots of cuddle time. I've had lots of great time with my son. My wife and I have continued we have a weekly date night. We've had that for 17 years. So it's been the beautiful gift of time. And the Lord's been so gracious. Now, as the phases continue to be rolled out and baseball season is now upon us, for my son, I'm seeing that time get pulled back a little bit. And I'm more aware of it now. I'm more aware that, wait a minute. In fact, I was proud of my son the other day. He said, "You know what, Dad, if I don't have to go to all the practices if you'd rather I just stay home with the family." So I'm hoping that this has changed the way we all see time, because we were given a gift. This pandemic, although it's been awful in every regard, the one upside is the gift of time.
Yeah. Slowing down and realizing how many, it sheds light on how many competing agendas there are for our time. And we know that, but when they're eliminated for a season, then you see the beauty of what's left if we could just make those choices in the moment more and more. So, well, that blesses me to to know about that part of your journey with your family. You've been a blessing here over this time. So
Thanks, Joe.
thank you so much for taking time out of your midday to join us. And I'm so glad just before we came on, Clinton was said he was on a phone call with a donor, and there was good news attached to it. So I see
Yes.
God's hand of provision. I've seen that too. So that's deepening our faith that, he's not going to leave us or forsake us. And so we don't have to go there in our head. We can just be steady state on that and not be tossed back and forth on the waves of will he, won't he, did I do it right? Did I not do it right? So
To get our ball in the weeds. Is that what that guy used to say? Get whatever, something to do with a ball and there were weeds. I don't. That's all I remember.
Davisms, and I would often get the plural not right on that, and so I try not to. So,
yeah, I can see how that could be bad.
Not as good that way. So, but boy, it was a joy talking to you. Lots of people commenting and joining in. Glad you were all able to join us. These all could be hour plus conversations, but we do want people to be tempted to watch it after the fact. So
there you go.
We're going to leave it here for now, but Clinton's going to be sharing the Sunday at Fellowship. It's our kind of trial run back indoor worship. So you'll get to figure out that dynamic. You won't have to preach to an empty room, though.
Yeah, I know that there's a bit of bitterness in your voice when you say that, Joe. So
well, it just worked out. It's going to be a limited engagement with just registration only these next 2 weeks. But July 5th, we're going to, if all goes well, kind of the plan is to open up. So so glad that you'll be able to share with us on Sunday. Thank you for sharing with us today. I hope the rest of your day is fantastic, as I hope for all of you who are joining us. I'll see you back again for Viral Faith on Friday with another special guest who's going to join us. So I'm looking forward to that. So thank you. Last word from you, Clinton.
Yeah, I would just say to anyone watching, and I know that every Sunday is a good Sunday to bring a friend or a family member to church. And I know we've got the whole social distancing thing, and I know we definitely have the signups for being able to come this Sunday. But as far as the YouTube stream is concerned, this is a Sunday that I'm hoping that you will embrace as a tool to share the good news of Christ with someone who may be struggling with mental health, loneliness, whatever. I'm hoping and praying that this is a message that is both informative around mental health, but also invitational in regards to the relationship with Jesus. So please be in prayer for me, but also be willing to engage some of your friends and family members in the conversation this weekend and next weekend as well, because I think we're going to continue this conversation the following weekend on Sunday too.
For sure. That's a great word, because seating is unlimited online. So
that's it.
Please invite anybody in your sphere of influence, because good things are going to happen. So thanks once again, Clinton.
Thank you.
Enjoy the day. Everybody else, hope you have a good rest